Welcome to another edition of A Voice to the Gentile Church. I'm Jim Wingerter. Next to me is Pastor Roger Diaz. Dolores is on assignment today, and we're going to forego current events so that we can deal with the subject, and the subject is the apocalypse, and that there's varying perspectives on what all of that means. And so that's a chunk of information to discuss. And
I think we can talk about this for at least 3 or 4 different programs. This came up in class actually last night. We started talking, and this came up.
Yeah.
The subject is incredibly broad and involved and in-depth, and this is something that will entail current events. I mean, you can't talk about, quote unquote, the apocalypse without current events, because as it turns out, we live in a time when current events are pointing to, the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be biblical or even, focused on the apocalypse to recognize that we are living in very, very apocalyptic times. Back in the 1970s, there was this huge, the Cold War, this huge concern about nuclear exchange, right?
Yes.
I was a kid growing up in the 70s. I'm petrified of it.
Sure.
But we were so far removed then from the reality of nuclear exchange, but we're much closer to it today. And people are not even seemingly concerned about it. People are seemingly unconcerned about it.
Right.
Which is amazing, because you remember the huge concern that this was back in the 60s and the 70s, even into the 80s.
I think largely Americans feel like it will be somewhere else. It won't be here.
Yeah. Well, we live in a world where there's a greater threat today of a nuclear exchange than ever before.
Right.
It's an amazing
When
thing.
we were kids, there were only 2 countries that occupied nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Today you have Pakistan that has nuclear weapons, India that has nuclear weapons, and Pakistan is currently involved in negotiating, peace talks between the United States, Israel, and Iran. But Pakistan hates Israel. So think about that. Israel has nuclear weapons. The United States has nuclear weapons.
Right.
So think about this scenario there where you have Pakistan, a country that bears nuclear weapons, negotiating peace between Israel, Iran, and the United States. And again, the hatred for Israel in Pakistan is visceral. It's deep. So, current events today are so ominous when it points to exactly what we'll talk about today, the 4 different views of the apocalypse. So let me say that there are many views of what the apocalypse would be like. I mean, there's so many different ideas about what's going to happen. There seems to be 4 prevailing views, which is what we'll talk about. And this program, we can stretch this out, like I said, 3 or 4 times over. So we're not going to cover every detail. The minutiae of this, the finer details of this, we're not going to cover. So we're just trying to get to some main points concerning the time that we're in. So let's start with the Jewish view. When I say the Jewish view, the view that eschatological Jews, not all Jews are eschatological. Not all Jews are looking at Bible prophecy. The reality is there's perhaps a minimum, a minority, I should say, of Jews who are actually looking at the world through the lens of, prophecy or end-time events. But they do have a viewpoint on eschatology and what we call the apocalypse. So from their view, they see what's referred to in Hebrew as Gog and Magog, which is Gog and Magog. And they refer to that time of Gog and Magog as the end of days. Very, very common way of a common Jewish way of pointing to what's referred to as the end of days. It comes from Ezekiel chapter 38. Mm-hmm. Gog and Magog. Now, there is a pressure here with that concept of Gog and Magog being the very conflict that's facing the world today, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. So, from the Jewish view, Gog of Magog, this great war happens, end of days, is considered to be the battle of good over evil. And this is where evil will be put down and good would prevail. It's also considered to be an aspect of the great redemption, the Gedol Geulah. The Geulah brings in the time of the full restoration of Israel. And this is, of course, followed by the Messianic age. So what I just outlined is roughly the Jewish view of what the apocalypse or end-time events would be. And does that ring true with you?
Yes. So when they say the Messianic age, they don't mean an age where the Messianic church prevails. They mean the reign of Messiah.
The Mashiach.
Right.
Their view of the Messiah is different than the Christian view. The Christian view is that the Messiah is divine. Yeshua, Jesus is the Messiah, and he is God in flesh. They don't see the Messiah in that light. They see the Messiah as a great man. Certainly empowered by God. He's Mashiach. He's anointed.
Like King David.
But a super King David, right? The son of David is much more powerful than David. He'll do things that David couldn't do, but he's a man, and that's how they see it.
Okay.
But there's a great build-up that leads to the Messianic age, the age of Messiah, and that's Gog and Magog. Now, let's talk about what I perceive as a weakness in seeing Gog and Magog as what's happening today. First of all, Ezekiel chapter 38 comes following 37, which deals with the restoration of Israel.
Right.
Valley of dry bones. 36 of Ezekiel is clearly the restoration of Israel. The land blossoms, the people return. God said in chapter 38, I will bring them all back. And then he says, I will put my spirit in them, and they will be my people. I will be their God. So Israel is being restored in 38 into 37, Valley of dry bones. I have a certain opinion about that. That's a little different than the conventional opinion, which I'll not talk about. It will take us a field, but I don't want to get into that. So the Valley of Dry Bones comes after the restoration of Israel. So what is the Valley of Dry Bones? Okay, so there's going to be a specific miracle concerning the people of Israel where people that did not exist will, bones will come into existence.
Right.
But this follows the restoration of Israel. And then at the end of that comes in Ezekiel chapter 37, the last part of the chapter, the temple, the Mishkan, the Mikdash, is again situated in Jerusalem. That's how it ends. And David the prince, we believe the son of David, will be their prince. And it speaks about how God will be there and the nations will know that, that he's the God of Israel when he puts his sanctuary in the midst of Israel. So if you follow that in a chronological way, chapter 36, Israel is restored, the land is restored, the land blossoms. I saw a wonderful video yesterday. There's a Brazilian lady, her name is Aileen, and she does these videos. She's an archaeologist, and she's really great. You should follow her on YouTube. Okay. And she did a video just a few days ago of how the Dead Sea, the area around the Dead Sea is blossoming, which I've never seen that before.
Right.
She did this video, and she showed flowers and poppies and all sorts of different spring flowers, popping up everywhere around the Dead Sea, but only on the west side of the Dead Sea, the side
not
of Israel.
On the Jordanian side.
Right, and she did this incredible video also showing that Judea, how it's blossoming. So this is happening today. So she is an incredible YouTuber, and does some really incredible videos. And it's really about the restoration of Israel. So Ezekiel 36 talks about this, how the land will blossom, the people will return, 37, Valley of Dry Bones, and then the temple.
Right.
And then that's followed by chapter 38. So, based on that, Gog and Magog, that conflict comes after the temple is, rebuilt. and the people of Israel are dwelling in the land. And that's what it says in chapter 38. We could go read it, but maybe our listeners, if you're interested, you can go read it yourself, chapter 38 of Ezekiel, how Gog and Magog happens. It's the first part of the chapter. And then it goes on to say that the people who dwelt securely, without fences, without walls, were attacked by Gog and Magog. It happened suddenly. Well, that's not the scenario that we're seeing today.
Right.
What we're seeing today is different. There's no safety. There's no, peaceful dwelling.
Right.
And every attack from Amalek or Islam is well expected and prepared for. What we see in chapter 38 of Ezekiel is all of a sudden, unexpected attack from Gog and Magog, right? Ultimately, Gog and Magog is destroyed. So from my point of view, there is no way, based on just what we see there in chapter 38 of Ezekiel, 36, 37, 38, that what we're facing right now is Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog is in the future, and we'll see that as it relates to what the book of Revelation talks about.
Yes.
So as a Jewish person, I can understand, okay, you can identify Gog and Magog, but it needs to be studied carefully again, because chapter 38 of Ezekiel clearly shows that the people of Israel are dwelling safely. And the attack from Gog and Magog seems to be all of a sudden and unexpected. That's not what's happening today, right? So that, in a nutshell, is the Jewish view. We can go further, but there's no need for it. Let's talk about now the Shiite and the Sunni views, the Islamic, the Muslim view.
Right.
The Shiite view is more eschatological, more apocalyptic than the Sunni view. The Sunni view is almost identical except for one factor, which we'll talk about. So the Shiite view basically says that there's a hidden imam. The Shiites are called Twelvers. They're called Twelvers because they believe in the 12th imam. And the 12th imam is this mystical imam who will suddenly be revealed. The idea is that he is among us now, and at a certain time, he will be revealed. And this imam is called the Mahdi. So from the standpoint of Shiite Islam, the Mahdi is alive today. He's functioning somewhere, and at a certain point, he'll be revealed as the 12th imam, right? So that's where Shiite Islam gets the thrust of their eschatology from. It says, it takes a position that the imam, this 12th imam, will lead the entire world into great conflicts. And he will lead Islam into jihad, that the Islamic world will fight a holy war against the infidels. And this war will be ultimately against the Antichrist. The Antichrist in the Shiite, in Arabic, he's referred to as Dachal, if I can spell that right. Jalal, or however you say that in Arabic, I don't know. But he's the Antichrist. And so the Imam is going to come and lead the world in this jihad against Antichrist. There's a lot of people who's fingering Trump as the Antichrist, yeah. We said that would happen. So I think it's either Jared Kushner. He's a good candidate. He's a good candidate for Antichrist. Why? Because he's Jewish. So, according to the traditional idea of Antichrist, the Antichrist would be Jewish. He would be handsome. He would be charming. Young. Yeah, that's Jared Kushner. But they've strayed away from Jared Kushner. Now they're looking at Trump as the Antichrist. Who knows? Maybe Marco Rubio would become the Antichrist next. But the idea of Antichrist is not exclusively Christian. That's what I want to say. It's Islamic.
Yeah.
The Muslims believe in Antichrist. And the 12th Imam will come and make war against the Antichrist. So you can understand why the Shiite Muslims are identifying what's happening now as a holy war, right?
Right.
Because they're clearly seeing Trump or Kushner or whoever as the Antichrist. And they must make war against the Antichrist. So the Mahdi will eventually prevail, and he will rule over all of Islam, rule over all the world, and he will usher in the time of Messiah, Jesus' judgment. So that in a nutshell captures the Shiite view of end time events. There's a hidden imam. He's hidden right now. At a certain point, he's revealed. He leads Islam in a war against the Antichrist, which would be the West, and will prevail and will bring about order. And when order comes into being, you're talking about global Sharia, right?
Yeah.
When there's global
Right.
Sharia
Right.
at the hands of the 12th Imam, then he'll hand everything over to Jesus. He's the one who comes to prepare the way in their thinking. So that's Shiite Islam. And so Shiite Islam, they are considered to be the more far out ones than the Sunnis. The Sunnis consider themselves more realistic, but the truth is, the Sunni view of the apocalypse is not much different, except that they don't believe in a 12th Imam.
Okay.
They believe the Mahdi will come, that he's not the 12th Imam. They believe the Mahdi will come, he will wage war against the Antichrist, the same concept. He will prevail and lead the world in global Sharia and bring about the conditions under which Jesus will come and judge the world. And that's what the Sunnis believe. Not much difference, right? The biggest quarrel between the Shiite and the Sunnis is that they don't accept a 12th Imam. Of course, the Shiites believe that the 12th Imam will come from them.
Sure. Of course.
So that apocalyptic view is what we see with the Muslims in general. And then you have the evangelical view. The evangelical view is typical Western Christian view. Premillennialists, that the apocalypse comes before the millennial kingdom, which is what they believe, and that there would be a pre-tribulation rapture before the apocalypse. And this is what stands out differently with the evangelical view compared to the more biblical view.
Right.
The idea of a rapture, and what's the rapture? I guess we should talk about the rapture. So you grew up in a pre-rapture environment, correct?
No one ever said anything about it.
But you grew up as a Presbyterian.
Yes.
You're a Calvinist?
Yeah.
Yeah. So...
Can you be a Presbyterian and not a Calvinist?
Yeah, sure. You got there are varying degrees of Calvinism.
Well, Dad didn't agree with John Calvin on issues
Calvinism.
of judgment.
So I'm not sure what the Calvinist position is on the rapture. They might be preterists.
Yeah.
I think they might be preterists. In fact, I don't know. The preterist view is different. The preterist view basically says that everything in the book of Revelation is fulfilled and complete. There will be no apocalypse. It's all done. That's the preterist view, which I think Presbyterians hold to.
Probably.
Some of them, anyway.
Yeah.
The Presbyterian movement or the Presbyterian church today is so divided. I'm sure there are many Presbyterians who accepts the evangelical view, pre-millennialist, pre-tribulation. Anyway, so the evangelical view, which you're talking Bible Belt America, right?
Sure.
You're talking,
yes, right.
And much of Western Christianity holds to that pre-tribulation view, premillennialist view. We will not be here for the apocalypse. The apocalypse is not our consideration from their point of view. They're escapists.
Right.
We'll escape the great tribulation. We'll be raptured pre-tribulation, pre-millennium.
Yeah, Paul would surely give them a good scolding.
Yeah, that concept is a Johnny-come-lately doctrine. What I mean is, it's not historic, it's not biblical. No one taught it in the Bible. What Jesus talked about in Matthew chapter 24, the Olivet Discourse, is in stark contrast. It undermines the whole pre-trib concept. But that doesn't stop them from teaching it, right? Never did.
Never did.
So that doctrine is only about 200 years old.
Yes,
200 years old. It stemmed from, and we've talked about the origin of it before.
Sure, I call it an end time delusion because in over the 2,000 years that have gone by, it's the end time.
Yeah, the doctrine of pre-tribulationists, pre-tribulationalism, pre-tribulation rapture again, which is very, very prevalent in the West, really started with a Jesuit by the name of Emmanuel de la Cunza Diaz, a Chilean theologian. He went from Santiago, Chile in the 1870 or something. And he moved to Lima, Peru, where he wrote a book, The Coming of Messiah with Majesty and Glory. And in the book, for the first time ever in any Christian writing, we see the idea of a secret coming of Messiah, where he will come before he comes.
Right.
I responded to someone who was propagating that two coming return of Messiah, his twice return, where he will come and then come again. I confronted someone last night about this, didn't hear back from them. So Emmanuel de la Cunza in that book, for the first time anywhere, in any writings ever anywhere throughout history, presented a secret coming of Christ, where he will come and he will rapture, take away the elect, and then return with them at a certain point.
Right.
So he wrote that book, and we've talked about it before. A young Scottish believer by the name of Margaret MacDonald. She read the book in English. It was translated into English from Spanish, and she fell in love with it. She was enamored by it, and she began to talk about it and prophesy, because she was a part of the Scottish Presbyterian movement. And you may not know this, but the Scottish Presbyterians were very spiritual, very spirit-filled. That changed as time went along.
Yeah.
So she was a Scottish Presbyterian, and that whole Presbyterian movement was very active, very spiritual. And her prophecy and she from what I've read, she used to go into trances, fits of trances, and she would prophesy for hours upon hours. And she gained a lot of respect in the Scottish Presbyterian movement, and she was accepted as a prophetess. And the whole MacDonald clan, her brothers and the whole family, began to promote the idea of a secret coming of Christ, which was presented by this Jesuit. And so by the mid-1800s, you had writers, notable writers, Christian writers like Ironside and Darby, that began to promote the whole idea. And so at the beginning of the 1900s, the Plymouth Brotherhood got a hold of the idea, and they wrote the Moody Bible, the commentary on the Moody Bible, which includes the pre-rapture concept. And from then on, it was just pre-rapturism.
Right.
So it's a Johnny-come-lately doctrine. It's not grounded in history. It's not grounded in the Bible. But that's their view of the apocalypse. They will not be here to witness or to endure through the apocalypse. It would be nice if it was true. I mean, nobody wants to go through the apocalypse. Who wants to go through the apocalypse? I know you're not sitting around saying, I can't wait for the apocalypse to begin. No one is. But the truth
may it be quick.
But the truth is, according to the actual Bible, we will be here for the apocalypse.
Yeah.
We will go through the apocalypse. Now,
we'll have opportunity to be true witnesses through the time of suffering.
Sure. I used to listen to an old preacher, an evangelistic preacher from back in the 1950s. I'm not going to name him. I've done it before, but I better not name him because I had respect for him.
Sure.
And he was a preacher. He got onto the radio. He had these radio programs, and he would preach with zeal, and he would be convicting and convincing. And I liked him. But then one night, I listened to his program. He was going to talk about eschatology, prophecy. And he was a pre-tribber.
Mm-hmm.
And he introduced the whole concept of the pre-tribulation rapture. He basically said that we will not be here for it. It's not something we need to be concerned about. And then he said concerning the Jews, Israel is what he said actually, Israel, concerning Israel, God's going to do something with them during the time of following the rapture. We don't know, and quite frankly, we don't care. God will do something with them. We will not be here. And that idea is really the governing principle of the pre-tribulation rapture concept. We will not be here. So the apocalypse, we don't care. It doesn't affect us.
Problem.
Right. Doesn't affect us. And they will take certain verses from the Bible and they'll twist it. Like when Jesus said, not one hair from your head will be lost. They say, well, that's referring to us not being, having to go through the tribulation, which is amazing. Because what Jesus actually taught was that you need to prepare yourself for tribulation that is coming. Anyway, so the pre-trib concept of the apocalypse we don't receive. Needless to say, we don't agree. We don't agree with it.
Right.
And why? Because there's the biblical view of the apocalypse, which is much more edgy, much more much more challenging, but we believe that it's biblical, and so we must face it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What we see in the Bible now leading to what we call the apocalypse. And what does the word apocalypse mean?
It has to be Greek, doesn't it?
It's apocalypse. Yeah, the word apocalypse. I think it. You can look that up. I don't want to say what I think it is and be wrong. So the biblical view of the apocalypse really is presented in the book of Revelation, right? So when you think apocalypse, you think the book of Revelation. The word apocalypse basically means vision or revelation. Is that right?
An apocalypse is a profound, catastrophic event marking the destruction or end of the world. Derived from the Greek apokalypsis, meaning unveiling.
Unveiling, right.
Or revelation.
Right. So the actual word apocalypse does not mean the end of the world. It means insight, revelation, right? So John had a revelation. He had insight. And the insight that he had in the book of Revelation is about the end of this age, not the end of the world.
Right.
So
the King James translation says to the end of the world. That's where the confusion comes.
This world does end.
Right.
But the great apocalypse that we're looking at right now does not end the world. It transitions into a new age.
Right.
At the end of that age comes the end of the world, but the end of the world signals the beginning of a new and better world.
Right.
If you're a believer of the Bible, if you're a Christian that holds to the book of Revelation. Now, if you're a preterist, if your view on eschatology is a preterist view, this makes no sense to you. You don't care about this. Because the preterist Christian says the book of Revelation is irrelevant. It doesn't concern us.
Well, at some point it will matter to them.
Well, yeah. So the apocalypse now, viewed from a more biblical perspective, says that it leads to what's called in the Bible, in Revelation chapter 16, Armageddon. And what does Armageddon mean when you break down the word?
So Har's a mountain, and Megiddo.
Right. Is a mountain. It's barely a mountain. It's more like a hill.
Yeah.
A berm.
Yes.
In the Jezreel Valley, right? It's at the southwest corner of the Jezreel
Valley.
It
sits above the valley. That's
and that's Megiddo.
Yeah.
Now Megiddo has a historic relevance, right? What's the historic relevance of Megiddo? Well, many battles were fought there in that valley. Historic battles were fought there in that valley of Jezreel. It's also referred to as the Valley of Jehoshaphat, where God will judge. Joel chapter 3, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. So Megiddo is the mountain there. And the reference of Har Megiddo that we see in Revelation chapter 16 is pointing to a global conflict, a cataclysmic conflict, yes, but a global conflict that will be resolved right there at Megiddo. And that's the essence of Har Megiddo. So the book of Revelation points to that great conflict. The directing to that conflict begins in chapter 4. I mean, right following Jesus' appraisal of the 7 churches in Asia Minor begins that conflict, the development of that conflict. The pre-tribulationists, they say, well, we're raptured out in Revelation chapter 4. When the angel said to John, come up here, and I'll show you what is to come. So based on that statement, what's the purpose for him coming up here? So that he would see what was coming, the revelation.
Perspective.
Right. The actual apocalypse, the vision was given as he went up to heaven, right?
Right.
Now, the pre-tribulationists would say, well, that's the rapture. The whole church is raptured there at that point, which is chaos. Now, who came up with that concept? A Jesuit by the name of Francisco Rivera at the Council of Trent. Francisco Rivera introduced the idea that the church is taken up in Revelation chapter 4, Council of Trent. This is 1546 or something.
Yeah.
And then Emmanuel de la Cunza Diaz, this Catholic Jesuit theologian, took that concept and he built on it. So Revelation 4, according to the pre-tribulationists, is where the rapture happens. Well, I say no. Revelation chapter 4 is where the apocalypse begins. The vision that John had that leads to the end of days, that's where it begins. And so from chapter 4 all the way to chapter 19 is this build-up.
So we're in it. It's been going on for millennia.
Course, yeah, we're in it. You know, I'm really pleased to note that a lot of people are coming to terms with the reality of the seven seals. I'm seeing it more and more. We've been teaching it here for a long time, the reality of what those seven seals are. And I saw a little clip on YouTube, and it started off by saying, we're in the fifth seal. We're in the time of the fifth seal.
Right.
I said, whoa, well, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that. Sounds like something I would say. And then it went on to say, what's next is the sixth seal, a cataclysmic event, an earthquake, and then comes the seventh seal, the trumpets. I said, wow, someone's getting it. Because there are people out there that are able to study the Word of God and derive the truth of what the Word is saying.
Right. It's there.
So chapter 4 to 19 in the book of Revelation is all a build-up to Armageddon, the battle, this great end-time battle, which will culminate in Jezreel, the valley of Jehoshaphat. So there's so many places we can go with this right now. I'd like to say, first of all, that Joel, and we can go dig into this and do some reading. We got time, maybe. Joel captures the essence of this great battle in Joel chapter 3, which is Armageddon. Also in Zechariah chapter 12, Zechariah saw this. Zechariah reported that there would be all the nations. There would be an army, an armada of all the nations that will assemble against Jerusalem and Judah and the Jewish people, and all the nations, Zechariah said. But Joel, maybe we can pop over to Joel and take a little look at what Joel said.
Prophets should be alphabetical.
Yeah, he comes after Hosea, Joel. Let me read a little bit,
Sure.
Jim.
I'm glad you found it.
we can do some reading. We got time. We're doing good time with this, so it's good. So Joel, the prophet. Now I must say here, first of all, Joel is one of the youngest prophets. What I mean by that, he began to prophesy very early. He prophesied actually in the 9th century BC. So think about that. He prophesied during the time that the northern kingdom was splitting away from Judah in the south.
Right.
So he prophesied before Isaiah. He was one of the first prophets to prophesy. And Joel gives us this incredible account of the entire prophetic sequence of events that will lead to Armageddon, the final battle. So in Joel now, so let me just give a quick little synopsis on the book of Joel. Joel chapter 1 is effectively the dispersion of Israel. All right?
Yes.
Which Moses talked about at Mount Sinai and again at Mount Nebo, that Israel will transgress.
He laid it out.
Yeah, transgress sufficiently against God, and ultimately God will drive them out. So Joel chapter 1 is about that. It's sort of an ominous chapter. It's not a feel-good chapter for sure. So chapter 1, Israel will be judged for her sins, she'll be driven out. Chapter 2 begins with, blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy mountain.
Yeah.
That's judgment, right? That's talking about the Babylonians and also the Romans who destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. So chapter 2 also begins with judgment. But then right about in the middle of chapter 2, we begin to see a transition where it's beginning to transition from the time of judgment to the time of restoration. In chapter 2, for instance, if you want to read a little bit, Jim, maybe we can share the reading. So in chapter 2 of Joel, right in the middle of the chapter, smack in the middle of the chapter, we see a transition where it's no longer dispersion, judgment, but a call for restoration. So in chapter 2, if you can read, Jim, 15 to 16, and we'll talk about this as we read. What I want us to see here is that in chapter 2 of Joel, something transitions. It's as if God is waiting for this time when he will begin the process of the restoration of Israel.
Blow a trumpet in Zion. Consecrate a fast.
Before you go, the first trumpet that we see in chapter 2 is for war.
Right.
The second trumpet is for what? To consecrate a fast.
Right.
It's a time to get God's attention. So we blow a shofar, there's war. We blow a shofar to usher in a time of fast, right?
Right. Consecrate a fast, proclaim a solemn assembly, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders. Gather the children and the nursing infants, and let the bridegroom come out of his room, and let the bride take out of her bridal. I got that wrong. And the bride out of her bridal chamber. Keep going.
So let me read. So now it says, after this, the bride and the bridegroom. That's a statement that says there's going to be a time of rejoicing. Something good is coming. Right. And it says, let the priests, the Lord's ministers, weep between the porch and the altar, and let them say, spare your people, O Lord, and do not make your inheritance, your nakalah, a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the nations, where is their God? That's where we are right now. You see,
Yes.
we're in the middle of that transition
Yep.
period right now. And the priests, the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, the sons of Phinehas, these descendants of Aaron, are the ones to do it. But from a pure Christian perspective, a biblical Christian perspective, we are priests.
Right.
And it's okay for us to take that position and say, we will do exactly this. We will be the ones to say, spare your people, O Lord, and do no harm to your nakalah, your inheritance. Why should there be a byword among the nations? Why should they, among the people, say, where is their God? So, Jim, you're about to spill your cup right there. You might want to grab that.
Is it teetering?
So, you see, so Joel is seeing something here. He's seeing a transition that's pointing to exactly where we are today. It's leading to a great conflict, though. And so it goes on to verse 18. Then the Lord will be zealous for his land and will have pity on his people, the land and the people. The land and the people is his nakalah. So that word nakalah, inheritance, is used in 17 by the priest who is reminding God of his promises to Israel. God suddenly says, okay. Again, verse 18. Then the Lord will be zealous for his land and will have pity on his people, which is his nakalah.
Right.
This begins the process of the restoration. And the rest of the chapter, in chapter 2, is all about that. You come down to chapter 2, verse 28 to 32, it's about the restoration. It's about the great conflict that's building. Maybe you can read that, Jim. 28
It's hopeful.
to 32.
And it will come about after this, that I will pour out my spirit on all mankind, and your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions, and even on the male and female servants I will pour out my spirit in those days, and I will display wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And it will come about that whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be delivered. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape, as the Lord has said, even among the survivors whom the Lord calls.
So if you're a Christian and you're a pre-tribulationist, you need to consider that you will escape to Mount Zion.
You're right.
You're not escaping to some nebula in the universe somewhere. You're going to Zion.
He said it right there.
So now let me read a little bit here in chapter 3. Now, chapter 3 is the actual engagement of Armageddon. So middle of chapter 2, the priests, and I believe that's who we should be, are calling for God's mercy upon his people and land. God says, okay, the time has come. And then there's an apocalyptic scene here that we see in Joel chapter 2, 28 to 32. And then it begins in chapter 3. I'm going to read quite a bit here.
Okay.
For behold, in those days and at that time, what time? The time of the restoration, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations, right? Zechariah saw that as well.
Yes.
How many nations are excluded?
Absolutely none.
None. And I will bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's the essence of Armageddon, right? The valley of Jezreel. but it's Megiddo. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance, my Nakalah, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have divided up my land. You see, I want you to see here how the priest who stood and reminded God of his inheritance, his Nakalah, they sort of incited God to remember his Nakalah, his people and his land. And he does. And in chapter 3, he's saying, I'm going to enter into judgment with the nations because of my Nakalah, my inheritance, Israel, the land and the people. So now I'm going to pick up the whole story now in chapter 3, verse 9. I'm going to read. Here is Armageddon. Here is what's referred to as the apocalypse. This is Armageddon. Proclaim this among the nations. Prepare war. Rouse the mighty men. Let all the soldiers draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I'm a mighty man. Hasten and come, all you surrounding nations, and gather together there. Bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones.
Yeah.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Bring down, O Lord, you're talking about rapture. Bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones. We'll read in Revelation chapter 19. We'll do a fair cross-reference of that. Bring down your mighty ones. We're going to discover who the mighty ones are. Let the nations be aroused and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. How many are excluded? Not one. This is Armageddon. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe.
Right.
Come, thread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For great is the day of the Lord, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon grow dark, the stars lose their brightness. The Lord roars from Rome. No? The Lord roars from Washington, D.C.? No. The Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth tremble. But the Lord is the refuge for his people, his Nakalah, and a stronghold for the sons of Israel. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. So Jerusalem will be holy, and strangers will pass through it no more. The Lord will roar from Zion. That's what he'll dwell in Zion. He'll bring the nations up, and he'll judge them in the valley of decision.
Yeah.
That's biblical. That's the reality of the apocalypse, what we call the apocalypse. This is the vision that John had, but in a much broader context in the book of Revelation.
Right.
This is the vision that Zechariah had. This is the vision that Joel had. 900 BC, he had that vision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the apocalypse has to do with a certain location, but all the nations. The location is Jezreel. This year we were supposed to go to Jezreel. We couldn't make it there because of the war, but we were supposed to go there and stand on Megiddo, look over the valley and say, this is where it will happen.
Right.
This is where the decision of all decisions will be made, in this valley. Nevertheless, so the biblical view says there's a place, a literal place, where God will sit to judge. The armies of the world will come up against Israel. Apparently, they want to take Jerusalem. They'll come up to the Jezreel Valley with the intent to make it all the way to Jerusalem. And right there, he will judge all the nations in that spot. Now, the rapture, what about the rapture? So bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
Revelation chapter 19 now. Now, we just read from Joel, which is, quote unquote, the Old Testament, the Tanakh, the prophet, Nevi'im. Now we're going to read in the New Testament. As a Christian, this is your concern. So bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones in the midst of this great battle that's unfolding. So Revelation chapter 19 is in fact the rapture, the moment of the rapture. such powerful verses for us as Christians to look at. Let's look at verse 6, chapter 19. Then I heard something like the voice of a great multitude, like the sound of many waters, like the sound of mighty peals of thunder, saying, Hallelujah. For the Lord our God, the Almighty reigns. Let us rejoice and be glad and give glory to him. For the marriage supper of the Lamb has come, and the bride has made herself ready. It was given to her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and clean. For the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. That's who we are. Mm-hmm. We're the bride of Messiah, the church is. We'll be clothed in fine linen, bright and clean, which are the righteous acts of the saints. And then we pick it up in verse 11. This is, bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones. Yeah. So the fine linen is the garment of the priests.
The priests, right? Yes.
So, you know, the book of Revelation identifies the church as a priesthood 4 different times. Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 2, clearly stated that the church is, in fact, a royal priesthood. Right. So when you think of a royal priesthood, you think Melchizedek, right?
Yeah.
A king and a priest.
Right.
Righteous king, priest. So that's the priesthood that we're a part of. We're in the order of Melchizedek. But at this moment, we're raptured. We're in new creation bodies. We're going to exist forever in a form such as what Jesus resurrected in. New creation, right? Mm-hmm. Can never die again. Right. Will never suffer, decay. Will overcome sin entirely. Will become perfect vessels of God's, kavod, His glory. That's the essence of the new creation body. We exist to hold His kavod, His glory, and we're coming with Him. Let's read. These are the mighty ones. That's my point. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name written on him which no one knows except himself. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. The Word of God, the Devar Elohim. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed with fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. Bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones.
Right.
And that's what's happening here. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he will smite down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. And he threads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty, and on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The rest of the chapter is the end of the beast government. So in the biblical view, what leads to Armageddon is the building up of a new world order. Now, this new world order is not new. It's ancient. Right. It's Babel. It goes all the way back to Babel. Now, we might be surprised to know that in the mid-1800s, man began to work towards the establishment of this beast, this new world order. Americans, nonetheless. We'll talk about a certain Confederate general. His name was Albert Pike. Many of you know who Albert Pike was. Albert Pike became responsible for what? The formation of the Ku Klux Klan.
Ku Klux Klan.
He brought that thing into existence. He also did something that's not mentioned a lot, and you know about this. He paganized the Freemason organization more, or Freemason, order, secret society. He paganized it more than it was already paganized. Mm-hmm. He brought aspects of Illuminatiism, however you want to say that.
All right, right.
He brought aspects of the Illuminati into the whole realm of the Freemasons. In other words, the Freemasons existed fine. They were sort of a sketchy pagan-ish type organization. Albert Pike came along and he infused that whole thing, and the Scottish Rite as well, with even more pagan aspects. He wrote the book, Dogma and Doctrine, right?
Yes.
And what do you know about that book?
It's as long as the Bible. It's 1,000 pages. And hardly anyone in the Masonic order reads it because it's so big. And they think that they already know what it says, and they don't know what it says.
So what did you discover?
I discovered, I went through the whole doggone thing because we were having a family feud, and I was looking to clarify. So there are 3 distinctive places in that book that identify that the light bearer is Lucifer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Albert Pike was a self-described Luciferian. Luciferianism is an ancient, if you want to call it a religion, okay, but it's an ancient belief system, which basically says that God had 2 sons, and this goes back to Babylon. It goes right back to Enki and whatever that other, to the 2 sons of God, and one was favored, the other one wasn't. The one who was favored kind of curry-favored his position with God. The one who was not favored was actually the rightful heir.
Okay.
And of course, it's referring to Lucifer,
Yes,
right?
right.
So the whole idea of Luciferianism says that Adonai, who is supposed to be Jesus, is not the rightful heir, and that Lucifer is, in fact, the rightful heir. So what's the word Lucifer? It comes from, of course, it's Latin. It comes from what we see in Isaiah chapter 14, the light bearer, shining one, right? Lucifer.
Right.
No surprise that when the first Jesuit Pope came into office, the first Easter celebration, they did a chant, if we can call it a chant. They did a whatever you call that, and the word Lucifer was used several times in it.
Yeah.
And when the Vatican received about 1,000 emails in a very short space of time, querying what are you doing mentioning Lucifer, they said, well, we were not referring to Jesus as Lucifer. We were referring to the light that he gives. That is basic Luciferian doctrine.
Yeah.
And the Vatican engaged in that, right? I'm not surprised, but that's what they did. So the whole concept of what we see in the Freemason movement concerning Luciferianism was interjected by Albert Pike. Now, Albert Pike, somewhere around 1871, he wrote a letter to an Italian illuminist by the name of Giuseppe Mazzini. And in this letter, he postulated that what's necessary for a new world order to come into existence is, in fact, 3 world wars. So these 3 world wars would begin with a war in Europe that will initiate the whole process. Following that, there would be a war that would involve Germany and the Nazis. He said it. Nazism will be a part of that war. And then the 3rd World War will involve the Islamists and the Zionists, a war between the Zionists and the Islamists. And that will be the end of the process. After that, the world will be ready for the Illuminati.
Right.
For the illumination, the shining one. So he wrote this thing in 1871. And lo and behold, at the beginning of the 1900s, we have the First World War.
So that's right after the Civil War, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a general in the Civil War.
Right.
Right after the First World War, lo and behold, we have a Second World War that did involve the Nazis,
Right.
did involve Germany.
Right.
And then you have another war that's shaping up in the world today that's exactly about the Islamists and the Zionists. Now, the letter is in a museum somewhere in England, and there used to be an actual photograph of the letter that someone took and put it up on the internet. I don't think you can find that now. But it's now being hoaxed. Of course, we would think for sure that the world order that's in place, this new world order that's actually in place, will want to hoax that letter. But there were so many decades of that letter being displayed that you can't deny it at this point. The letter is real. Albert Pike did write that letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, and it was carried out, not by Mazzini, but by illuminists, powerful men who were engaged in global affairs. And these powerful men and organizations like the Club of Rome, ultimately the League of Nations, all of these globalists, demonically driven globalists, brought about the conditions for these 3 world wars. And so what I'm saying is, ultimately behind this movement, the beast, is the evil one himself. So the evil one, Satan, can only utilize women who would subject themselves to him.
Right.
They become his implements. So there's been sufficient implements, human implements,
Yeah.
that have been working on behalf of this whole thing. So here we have it today. We're seeing it. So someone might argue, well, then that's proof that Trump is the Antichrist or Jared Kushner, because they're sort of facilitating this, what would become the Third World War. So however it happens, whoever is involved, God is ultimately orchestrating this whole thing, the God of the Bible. Why? Because he wants to bring to light or bring to bear exactly what we just read.
Yeah.
God is not taken by surprise that the evil one will want to strike up a war between Islam and Zionism. Of course, Islam exists to oppose Zionism, right? So let's think about it. When the modern Zionist movement was initiated sort of officially in the beginning of the 1900s, what happened? The Muslim Brotherhood came upon the scene. The whole purpose of the Muslim Brotherhood was to say we must never allow the Zionists to capture the land of Israel. That was their whole purpose. I mean, all of Islam mounted up against, quote unquote, the Zionists, that they would not have the land of Israel. How well did they do? Despite all of their efforts, they're losing this war.
Yeah.
God's involved in this.
Right.
God is the one who's bringing Israel back to the land. Just as the word says, he's bringing them back, he's restoring them. The reaction of the evil one, the Albert Pikes of the world, the Manzinis of the world, is to resist it, to somehow bring about a global war that will somehow stop it. Nazi Germany, that's what they wanted. They wanted to do everything that was capable, that they were capable of, to stop the Zionist process. Of course, they failed.
Right.
And this movement today is also going to fail. But this is the big one, and that's the point. This is the beast, the world order, the world system. This is Satan's best foot. He's putting out his best foot. He's
Right.
doing his best at this point. And it will fail because God's going to bring all the nations into the valley of Jehoshaphat, the valley of decision, where he will judge them.
Right.
Following that, as we read there in Joel chapter 3, wonderful passage, Jerusalem becomes the place where God will dwell in Yeshua. So as a Christian, now, the biblical view of the apocalypse, eschatology, is that those in Christ will resurrect on the day of his coming and will reign with him for 1,000 years in Jerusalem. After that 1,000 years comes Gog and Magog, that's Revelation chapter 20, and Gog and Magog is followed by the great white throne judgment, which is
Right.
the end of the age.
Right.
So strictly speaking, the Jewish view is correct. They're off by about 1,000 years,
Right.
right? Which, I mean, again, they don't have the book of Revelation or
Right.
Revelation 20 to embrace as,
Right.
as truth. But it will all come to bear that,
Right.
yes, there is a great conflict. It is Armageddon. It is the battle that leads to the throne of Christ, the throne of Messiah, where he will reign, the Messianic age for 1,000 years. At the end of that comes the new creation.
Right.
But Gog and Magog happens. And Gog and Magog is not like this conflict. This conflict has been building since Babel. I mean, really.
Yes.
This
Yes.
conflict we're seeing right now, what we call Armageddon, is 5,000 years old, and it's been building since Babel. And so here we are, we're at the apex of it. We're at the point where it's going to culminate. It's going to happen. Gog and Magog is different. If you read
Yes.
we don't have time right now, but if you read the account in Revelation chapter 20, Gog and Magog happens suddenly. Everything's fine, and then boom, Gog and Magog. It's the same picture that we see in Ezekiel chapter 38. The temple is there, the Mishkan, the Mikdash, right? That's the millennial kingdom temple.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, Gog and Magog, and it takes everyone by surprise, right? That's the point.
Right.
Revelation chapter 20, Gog and Magog happens instantly, suddenly, and they are suddenly destroyed.
It's interesting because we're told that Satan is bound for 1,000 years, for a millennia. Mm-hmm. And then he's released again. And
For a short time.
right away, he's boldly manifested through the rebellious.
So here is my belief system. And I can't prove it. It's just a theory at this point.
Okay.
I believe that Islam, what we know as Islam, the ideology of Islam, will survive Armageddon, into the millennial kingdom.
Okay.
It'll be like a seed that will sit barren. And when Satan is released, he will fertilize that seed in a very short space of time.
Right.
And Islam will rise up again. God might be, in terms of Shiite Islam, God might be the 12th Imam from their point of view.
I see what you, yeah.
So that's what I believe. So I can't prove it, but that's my own belief system. Nevertheless, something happens in a very short space of time that brings all the world in a very, very quick moment up to Jerusalem. And then comes what? That's the end of the world as we know it.
Right. This creation is done away with.
The old creation.
And
a new creation. Right? Isaiah chapter 65. So that's the scenario. There's more to it than that. Of course, the new creation, there's a whole eternity that we can consider, which the Bible doesn't give us much to hold on to. But that effectively is how we would see eschatology, the apocalypse.
Right.
So from our point of view, the apocalypse is not a dreadful thing. It's dreadful, it's going to be awesome, but the apocalypse is leading to a better world, much better world.
Right.
A world where the Messiah will reign for 1,000 years, at the end of which all sin will be eradicated at the great white throne judgment, and there will be a new creation. No more sin, no more death, no more suffering. It will all be done away with.
Right.
An eternity of God. That's the whole point to Revelation chapter 21, 22. An eternity of God forever, reigning in the earth. So and we believe that to be true. Why? Because we're Christians and we're supposed to believe that. So that's the program. And so, Jim, take it from here.
So we're hosting a guest speaker, Yonatan Behar, lives in the community of Har Bracha in Samaria. He's going to be here at Fellowship Church Sunday night, April 26th, and that service will begin at 7 o'clock. And those that are interested in hearing him are welcome. And that is our program. If these questions raise questions in your thinking, surely they do, you are at liberty, and we would ask you to share those questions with us. You can do easiest by emailing us at voice@buildupzion.org. Again, voice@buildupzion.org. And until next week, shalom.